Hey everyone, Kitana here and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my astro community. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about Pluto in your birth chart. Now in astrology, Pluto represents sex, death, transformation, obsession, and power. And in this video, I'm going to explain how that manifests in your birth chart and really how it manifests in your daily life. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the first house. So Pluto in the first house, now first house does represent identity. So right away, if you have Pluto in the first, you're somebody with a very powerful presence. Like literally your presence might be very domineering. It might be very intimidating as well. You can be someone with a very penetrating stare too. Like something about your eyes or your face is just very, very perceptive. And then of course on a deeper note, Pluto in the first house people, you do have an inclination towards control. You're somebody who needs power over things, or maybe even maybe you want power over others or power over yourself. Either way, you need this sense of control and power over things to feel satisfied. You can also be someone who experiences very chaotic things that you do have to rise above. You're somebody who is definitely faced with certain challenges in your life, but it's weird for you specifically. It's like those challenges teach you how to become more powerful, and that's how you ultimately gain all the power that you do have, is because you've experienced challenges that prompted you to evolve into this like powerful state. And you're definitely somebody who does go through a lot of transformations, especially identity transformations. You're somebody who might change their identity a lot. Not really on a physical level, maybe on a physical level, but mostly it's very internal for you. It's very psychological. It's very subconscious for you. And then another thing I will say about this placement is that people might be obsessed with you. Just being just who you are as a person, people just might love you a lot. Like they might be obsessed with you, or they might just hate you for no reason. This is definitely a placement of extremes with people. Like I said, I might put some examples of this on the screen, but people really might love you a lot, hate you a lot. It goes up and down. There's never one consistent like opinion of you. It's always like love or hate, because Pluto does rule extremes. And a lot of times people can really obsessively like you to an extreme, or excessively hate you to an extreme. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the second house. Now Pluto in the second house, now this suggests you do have a lot of power and control, and maybe even obsession over material things. You can be somebody who might be obsessed with finances, or obsessed with money, or just kind of obsessed with materialism. I think the downside of this placement too is that you might go through a lot of financial loss in your lifetime, a lot of financial extremes. You're somebody who might have a lot of money one day or for like a month or a few months and then lose it all somehow. You go through these very extreme fluctuations with your finances. But the brighter side of that is the fact that you learn how to become very strategic. This is a very strategic placement, especially with money, financial planning. You're really great at strategy because you know what it feels like to be broke, to have money, and go through the extreme of that, so you know how to plan ahead. And then you also might be very skilled at making something out of nothing. You're very skilled at transmutation. Transmutation is the art of really making something out of nothing, right? So you can have like $100 in your bank account and somehow make $1,000 the next day. And that's a very specific talent to Pluto in the second house people. But either way, a lot of your power derives from your material possessions. Like you can be somebody who, I don't know, like you build a certain financial life for yourself. This is definitely a placement where it's like you're very obsessed with building something. Usually it's financial, usually it has something to do with like investing, and you very much like, I don't know, you get your power from the fact that you built something. You built a legacy, you built financial wealth, you built yourself into a millionaire, or a six-figure earner. You get a lot of power from that fact alone. And you only have the potential to gain that power because you've experienced the extreme of having no like financial income to having a lot of financial income. Okay, let's talk about Pluto in the third house. So Pluto in the third house, now this is a very investigative placement. This is a placement of someone who has a very probing mind, somebody who's always trying to search for answers, search for knowledge. You're very, very curious, but your curiosity is more than superficial. It's very, very deep. You look at the deeper meanings of things, the more psychological meanings of things, the secrets behind things. You're somebody who definitely loves like digging into secrets, discovering hidden knowledge. You're definitely somebody who loves to like solve mysteries and things like that. And I will say this is a very intuitive placement. If you have this placement, Pluto in the 3rd house, if you have like an inclination about something or you have a feeling about something, then you're probably right. I will say this is a almost psychic kind of placement, where it's like you just know things. You just know secrets. You know things most people wouldn't even guess to know. Or you just intuitively know it because of this Pluto energy in your house of intellect and communication. And then to bounce off that, like I said, 3rd house is communication, it is speaking, it is writing. So with Pluto here, you can be a very persuasive person, almost to a dangerous level, right? You can be somebody who is a persuasive speaker, writer, communicator in general. And because of that, you might be very influential. Again, you might have a talent with speaking or writing. You can write a very convincing, let's say you're in like advertising or something, you can write a very convincing, what's the word, like tagline or headline or something like that, where you can get people to buy things, get people to believe in what you're saying, just because your words are so powerful and so influential. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 4th house. Pluto in the 4th house really speaks to this sense of family. It really speaks to the past as well. 4th house is family, the past, our intuition, our ancestors, right? So to have Pluto here is maybe a challenge just because maybe in your past or your like childhood or growing up in your family, there were extreme situations, there was chaos, there was tension. And obviously that's like a wide range of topics. Like there's a lot of things you could have experienced that contributed to hardship or chaos or extremes or even extreme transformations in your household. But because you experienced that hardship in the past, it makes you more powerful in the present, because at a young age you knew kind of harder situations. So basically you learn from them, and then as you grow up, it's like you already know what's what because you've experienced it at a young age. And I will say this is also a very intuitive placement. I think I mentioned this in my psychic abilities video, but you can have a lot of psychic abilities, but I think specifically how this manifests for you is that you have a powerful lineage, like you have a powerful connection with your ancestors. But really specifically how this manifests for you is that you might have psychic abilities that you inherited from your ancestors. And then in general with Pluto in the 4th house, you have a very powerful lineage. You might come from a family of like maybe spiritual practitioners, maybe you come from a lineage of healers, a lineage of psychics, or maybe fortune tellers, or things of that nature. You come from a very spiritual lineage and you inherit that through your family. And you also might have a very powerful connection with your ancestors, even if you don't know it. Maybe they watch over you. Maybe you've had like paranormal experiences where you see ghosts, but they're not necessarily ghosts, but maybe they are your ancestors just watching over you. Overall, you do have a powerful connection with them, even if you're tapped into it or not. They very much are very influential in your life and influential to your subconscious mind. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 5th house. Okay, so Pluto in the 5th house, this indicates that you are a very creative person and you derive a lot of your power from your creativity. And really your creativity is so unique because it is derived from your unconscious mind. A lot of people with, when it comes to the topic of creativity, a lot of people just like recreate certain things, or they see something they like and recreate it in a creative way. But with you, your creativity derives from a place nobody really has access to. It comes from your subconscious mind, right? Your unconscious mind. So you might create some really like amazing things that no one has ever done before, or it's not really inspired by anyone specifically. It's something that you truly just drew from within yourself. And really in turn, you derive a lot of power from that. You derive a lot of your influence, a lot of your personal power from this sense of unique creativity you have. And then another layer to this placement is that when it comes to romance, you might be very invested in your romantic life. You might be invested in having like these passionate or very sexual relationships with people. This is a placement of someone who can be very sexual or even promiscuous. But overall, romance might be a focus for you. And romance isn't just superficial to you. You need it to be intense, passionate. You need like that all or nothing vibe with people when it comes to romance and dating. And because of that, you might have a fear of rejection because, like I said, you want this extremeness in relationships and you don't want to be rejected because of that. So you can have a fear of rejection when it comes to romance. And lastly, I will say that this placement is very competitive. You could be somebody who's competitive, especially like in social dynamics, maybe like in sports or when it comes to expressing your creativity. Let's say you're like in a creative competition or something, or you're trying to get like a scholarship or something like that. You can be very, very competitive. And overall, just really have this like, I'm gonna win, very intense, very like die hard winner mentality. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 6th house. So right away with Pluto in the 6th house, you might have a very powerful work ethic. And I will say that your work ethic is very dedicated. It's very determined. You're somebody who doesn't quit easily. You're somebody who is very focused on working towards something. And overall, there's like this theme of obsessiveness and fixation tendencies. Like you can really obsess over how to create solutions for things or fixate on problem solving. Very much fixate on how to create plans for things, how to create strategies for things. This is a very fixation-oriented energy for you. You can be very obsessive or fixated on health or diet too. You're somebody who is fixated on their everyday routine as well. So anything having to do with sixth house themes, you can be very fixated or obsessed with. Like I said, you can have an obsession with finding the answers to problems, a very problem solver mentality. You can also have the fear of criticism too. And another layer to this placement is that you might be very invested in healing others, or you might be skilled in healing others. House 6 or 6th house is the house of healing. It's the house of helping other people, being of service to other people. So to have Pluto here, it does suggest quite a healer placement. This can really manifest in a spiritual way too. You can be very invested in alternative healing, alternative medicine instead of traditional medicine. Maybe you're somebody who works a lot with herbs or manifestations or what's another like alternative healing, like acupuncture, maybe even energy healing, chakra clearing, things like that. You might do that for yourself or go to those places, or you might do that for other people. Either way, this is a very powerful healing placement. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 7th house. So Pluto in the 7th house can be very challenging. Right away, it suggests you might attract very obsessive or possessive partners. Or you might find yourself in relationship dynamics that are very possessive or obsessive. This can be a placement where you might experience people stalking you even. And another aspect of this placement is that you do want to be very intensely invested in relationships. That's something you do want. You do want passion and loyalty, but at the same time, you kind of fear intimacy. You might fear this kind of close bond with others. So it's kind of like a weird paradox where you want that intensity, but you fear it at the same time. Another thing too is that you can maybe bring out the worst in people. Like maybe when people are around you, like their worst side comes out, and somehow you don't even know how you do that, you just do. And it's because you have Pluto, which kind of rules the subconscious mind. So maybe you trigger people in a subconscious way. And when you trigger people in a subconscious way, it's really kind of inexplainable at first. You're like, wait, what did I say? What did I do? But you kind of trigger people naturally. And very much on a psychological level, therefore bringing out the worst in them. And then another layer with this placement is that a lot of your relationships can be like trial and error. Again, Pluto rules extremes, right? So a lot of your relationships can have these extreme themes to them: extreme love, extreme hate, extreme possessiveness or obsessiveness or detachment. There's this theme of extremes, maybe a theme of chaos. So through these chaotic ups and downs you go through with various relationships, you learn a lot. But really all of this serves to empower you in the end, because going through all that chaos or challenges with relationships, it teaches you a lot, and you do learn a lot about the principles you do value and how to have a functional relationship, because you've experienced so much dysfunction already. And lastly, I will say there's this like all or nothing theme in relationships with you. You're somebody that's like, I want all their loyalty, all their love, or nothing at all. I want marriage, I want this, a ring, a kid, I want like the whole nine, right? Or nothing at all. So there's this very extreme all or nothing mentality you can take on with relationships. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 8th house. So Pluto in the 8th house, right away, you're somebody very, very curious and invested in the taboo aspects of life. Specifically, you're very interested in very dark topics, maybe occult knowledge. Maybe you're interested in death or conspiracy theories or things like astrology or, I don't know, ancient secrets. Overall, you're very invested in these secrets of life. You have a very deep psychological mind. You might be even invested or curious about psychology, how the mind really works. And because of that, you have such a great skill of seeing the deeper parts of life, like truly seeing the parts of life people don't see, seeing things on a very subconscious level, psychological level, seeing the deeper layers, seeing really like the hidden meanings of things. And you have almost like this obsession or fixation with the darker topics of life. And it's kind of ironic too, because a lot of people might not know that about you. The 8th house does rule secrets. So you might be very interested in these topics, like on the low, like very secretly. Like this might be like what you do late at night. Like you might like search like conspiracy theories and stuff, but a lot of people might not know that about you. You might keep it secret from other people that you are interested in these things. And then on another layer, the 8th house does rule other people. It rules kind of like intimate relationships and other people's resources. So given that, you might attract people that want to control you. Like you can attract maybe controlling people or obsessive people or people that just generally want to have power over you. There's like this element of power, right, in this dynamic. So you can attract people who want to have power over you or control you in some way. And you can be somebody who is very skilled at healing other people. 8th house does kind of represent healing in a sense, and then it represents other people too in intimate like dynamics. So you can be good at healing people, healing other people's traumas, or you can be great at, I don't know, being like a psychologist or a counselor or somebody that can just hear other people's problems or traumas and help them work through it or help them solve it in some way. I will say this is a very intuitive placement. I think I might have mentioned it in my psychic ability placement video, but you're somebody who is very intuitive and skilled at understanding the intangible or invisible parts of life. And then to touch on the relationship thing again, you might be involved in very sexual or very intense relationships. 8th house does rule sex, so you can have a very, there can be very strong sexual themes in your relationships. And obviously sex is a theme in a lot of relationships, but with you, it might be a very intense, very passionate topic, something that you very much invest yourself in. And overall, I would say the 8th house Pluto placement is somebody who is very investigative and very invested in unraveling their subconscious. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 9th house. Okay, so Pluto in the 9th house, you're somebody who is very invested, very attached to their own personal beliefs. And that's really where you get a lot of your power from. It's like you get your power from what you believe in. Now this can be a religion, it can be a philosophy, it can be maybe a teacher you follow or a guru. Either way, you do have a certain set of beliefs you truly believe in on a very subconscious psychological level, and you gain a lot of power from having these beliefs. And generally you're somebody, I feel like this placement is kind of similar to Pluto in the 8th, where it's like you're always seeking the truth. You're seeking the deeper truth of life. You have this almost obsession or fixation on what really is the truth. You know, I think in society, we're told a lot of things, or we hear a lot of things, or we see a lot of things, but you really want to know, like, what's the truth behind this? What's really behind the curtain? What's the meaning of this? Where did it originate? You're on this constant search for the truth or answer to things. And because of this, this makes you a very wise person. You are very intelligent because you do have this insatiable sense of, or insatiable search for knowledge. So you do know a lot about a lot of different topics, and people find you very profound. You can be a very great professor or guru, a very persuasive one at that. And maybe even you might be a very influential teacher or persuasive teacher. Somebody that can just really command the audience or command people in a certain way because the knowledge you have is so profound and inspiring. And it really resonates with people on a subconscious level. And people might find you very, very deep too. Like this is a placement where it's like you're that person who always has like a deep theory about something or conspiracy theory about something, but it's not like people are like, okay, whatever. People actually pay attention to you with this placement. Like if you were to have like a theory or conspiracy theory of something, people would actually believe in it or believe it because you told them it. This isn't a placement where people just write you off a lot. This is a placement where people actually respect and listen to your theories. And then lastly, you might have like a lot of unusual experiences through your adventures. Maybe when you travel and stuff, you have these weird like transformative experiences. And maybe it's kind of like inexplicable. Like I can't think of an example, but maybe you can tell me in the comments where it's like you go somewhere. It doesn't have to be traveling necessarily. It could just be like an adventure somewhere or like a hike or something. And you just have these weird like spiritual, transformative, psychological experiences that change you in some way or teach you something in some way. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 10th house. So Pluto in the 10th house, right away, this is somebody who's very focused on their public reputation and their career. You're somebody who can be very obsessed with your career, or you're more so obsessed with like your reputation and how you are perceived by the public. And I think this is a skill though, because you have a very keen awareness about how other people perceive you. And overall, you do have a very powerful public presence. You're somebody people don't forget about. In a sense, you're like that person that stands out from the crowd, right? And it's not really on a physical level, but really on a subconscious, psychological, like there's just something very like distinct about you. There's something very unforgettable about you. Like you leave a very lasting psychological imprint on people's minds. And because of this, you have a lot of power and influence over others. And this makes you a very ambitious, very, very determined person. You're somebody who wants power, like true power. And you really seek that through your career mostly, or through reputation or status. You really want to climb that social ladder, right? And you do it in a very strategic way. This is a very strategic placement. And you're very much driven by achievement and reaching your goals, and you're very determined to accomplish them. Like this is the placement of someone where it's like they say they're going to achieve something, they're going to do it. Like if a Pluto in the 10th house person tells you like, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire in 5 years, like don't take that as a joke. They're literally going to do it because they're that determined to do so. And that's really how they gain their power, right? It's through achieving their goals. It's through achieving status in life. And then going back to the reputation thing, this is definitely someone that might have a love-hate relationship with the public. Again, Pluto rules extremes. So you could be somebody where it's like, everyone loves you one day and then everyone hates you. I think like Ariana Grande has this placement, or Nicki Minaj. I think both of them have it. And I think with people like celebrities who have this, you can see in their careers that people will drag them one day and like cancel them, and then the next day love them. So there's like this very love-hate relationship with people. There's also an obsession from people you might have. Like people might be very obsessed with you, like mostly like in the public, in a public sense, not really in a one-on-one sense. And like I just mentioned with those two celebrities, they have very cult-like following. So this is somebody that can generate a cult-like following. Obviously in real life, like you might not have a cult following, but you might have people that are just kind of obsessed with what you do. And then lastly, what I will say about this placement on a deeper level is that you do have the inclination to change the world in some way. You're somebody who has a very keen sense of like how the public perceives them, and then you perceive the public in a specific way too. So, you have this ability to see the world as it is and then see what needs to be transformed or see what needs to be healed. You can have a, this can manifest as maybe like a social justice thing too. Like you're very, this can manifest as maybe like a social justice thing too. Like maybe you're very interested in transforming humanity in some way or healing humanity in some way. Either way, you're interested in like transforming the world in some way. And maybe you do that through your career, and that's one of your major goals that you do have. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 11th house. Okay, so Pluto in the 11th house, this suggests that you might have a lot of influence and power in group dynamics. Like you can be somebody who is like a community leader. You're somebody who is very influential to people in your community, people around you. Maybe you gain power through groups. For example, maybe you're in a sorority or a group at your school or a club or a society or something like that, where you gain power from that group that you are in. And then this also makes you somebody who's very loyal to those groups, loyal to the people in those groups. There's a sense of loyalty and passion that you invest in the groups that you're a part of, the friendships you're a part of, the friend groups, the maybe even like Facebook groups, the sororities, societies, etc. And I think the flip side of Pluto in the 11th is that you are influential to others. You make a great leader in groups, but you might be somebody who is easily influenced by others too. Somebody who, I don't know, not necessarily a follower, but maybe you just are influenced by people very easily. On the same coin, but on the other side of that, you are very influential to other people as well. And then another thing I will say about this placement is that you might believe in transforming humanity in some way. And also with Pluto in the 11th house, you might be somebody who's very invested in transforming humanity in some way. 11th house is the house of humanitarianism and kind of serving others in some way or serving the collective. So you can be very focused on that, specifically from the angle of transformation. And because of Pluto's presence here, you can be very determined to do so. Okay, so let's talk about Pluto in the 12th house. So with Pluto in the 12th house, this kind of manifests the same as like Pluto in the 8th house, but this ultimately makes you somebody who's very invested in the secrets of life, maybe the spiritual aspects of life. And this is also a very intuitive placement. I did mention it in my psychic ability placement video, but if you have Pluto in the 12th, you're probably very intuitive. Maybe you're very much even psychic as well, because you really have a keen perception on things. 12th house does represent the subconscious mind. It represents everything that is intangible, everything we can't see. And you have a very keen awareness of those things, making you somebody who seems like you know things other people don't, or you know, or you can predict things or be intuitive about things because you have this close connection with everything that is invisible in a sense. And then also you can have dreams that tell the future. I mentioned this in my psychic ability video, but you can have dreams where it like tells you something about your real life that is like actually really relevant. Like your dreams aren't just dreams. They're not just random. They can be very instrumental in your real life. They can be very prophetic. They can tell the future. You can predict things with dreams. It could be almost kind of scary if you don't know about this placement or you don't know the power this placement has yet. This can also cause someone to have somewhat addictive behaviors. Again, Pluto rules obsession. It rules extremes. 12th house does relate to drugs. It does relate to alcohol, or it just relates to this sense of escapism. So you can escape through drugs or escape through sleeping or escape through these certain habits, I guess, but you can do it excessively. You could do it to an extreme amount. You can do it to an obsessive amount. So you have to be careful with your addictive tendencies with this placement. And as I mentioned with the first point, you can be somebody who is just very interested in the deep secrets of the universe. You're very spiritually connected. You can be very interested in like interdimensional things or like very deep spiritual concepts, not just like the superficial ones like manifestation and things like that, but literally like deep spiritual, maybe spiritual like science, spirit science type of concepts like dimensions or quantum physics or things like that. And then I will say one of the main challenges with this placement is that you can be somebody who is controlled by your subconscious fears. Like I said, you might get a peek of this in your dreams or I don't know, maybe when you're just by yourself, you might have these maybe irrational fears or subconscious fears or shame or guilt or this kind of emotions that you hold on to that are very, very toxic for you. And you hold on to them not in a conscious way, but in a subconscious way. So a lot of times you don't even know they're there, but you do hold on to a lot of subconscious fears, shame, or guilt, and sometimes they can even control your life. But if you do integrate them and deal with your shadow self, I think this placement especially needs to deal with like the shadow self that they have. You can't just focus on your superficial self or your conscious self. You really have to focus on your spiritual self and your subconscious self if you want to evolve to the highest rank of this placement. And I think the highest rank of this placement or the best manifestation of it or the highest manifestation of it is that you have power through your higher self. You find power through your spirituality. You find power from knowing your secrets, knowing your shadows, knowing your fears. Once you know those things about yourself and you address them, nobody can hold it against you. Nobody can control you. You can't be fearful anymore if you already know all your fears. So finding power through your higher self is like the best way this placement can manifest, but it does take you a bit like a long time maybe to get there just because you have a lot to deal with in terms of emotional baggage.